so we're going to get started right away, and we're going to read verse 18 of chapter 44. We're going to read to the end of the chapter, and then we're going to jump right in. How does that sound to you guys? Because isn't this an amazing Torah portion that we get to go through?
Yeah.
And I love it. And just as a precursor, there are some things that, well, no, it's not a precursor. We're going to read first. That's what we're going to do. So if nobody wants to do it, I will do it. But I'm going to ask real quick if somebody else wants to take care of that.
I'll read.
All right. Why don't you read? Chris, would you open us in prayer? Yeah.
Heavenly Father, we come before you in the name of your Son, Yeshua, HaMashiach, to give you thanks, Father, for another day, to give you thanks for the day of rest commanded, Father, to your people, that we may rest in you and your instructions and your ways with love and obedience, and that you allow the Holy Spirit, Father, to dwell here today, Father, and inside of each and every one of us as we receive the teachings of today, Father. We thank you for your blessings and protection and help that you got everybody here that needed to be here, Father. And for those online also.
Yes.
That you do with our Pastor John in his situations, that you keep him in strength and give him some word to share.
That's right.
Bring them to the kingdom, Father. We thank you and we give you all the glory.
Amen. All right. Just a reminder for those that have just come in, we have notes and bulletins, and you get to fold your own. So y'all can do that. All right. So Joy, if you will go ahead and read for us. To the end of the chapter, 18 through 34.
Okay. Then Yehuda approached Joseph and said, "Please, my lord, let your servant say something to you privately, and don't be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My lord asks his servants, 'Do you have a father or a brother?' We answered, 'My lord, we have a father who is an old man and a child of his old age, like one whose brother is dead. So that of his mother's children he alone is left, and his father loves him. But you said to your servants, 'Bring him down to me so I can see him.' We answered, my lord, to your servants, We answered, my lord, the boy can't leave his father. If he were to leave his father would die. You said to your servants, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you.' We went up to your servant, my father, and told him what my lord had said. But when our father said, 'Go again and buy us some food,' we answered, 'We can't go down, only if our youngest brother is with us.' Then your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. The one went out from me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I haven't seen him since. But if you take this one away from me too, and something happens to him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol with grief. So now if I go to your servant, my father, the boy isn't with us, seeing how his heart is bound up with the boy's heart. When he sees that the boy isn't with us, he will die, and your servant will bring the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol with grief. For your servant himself guaranteed his safety. I said, if I fail to bring him to you, then I will bear the blame before my father forever. Therefore I beg you, let your servant stay as a slave to my lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go up with his brothers. For how can I go up to my father if the boy isn't with me? I couldn't bear to see my father so overwhelmed with anguish."
All right. Okay, what we were talking about real quick, because this is so much about relationships. I was giving a little background that you just see a sentence or two written in the word. But when you read this apocryphal book, it talks about her. She always says she's an orphan. She's an orphan. And it talks about that she was taller than the rest of the people in Egypt. She was very beautiful. Comely, she was as Rachel and Rebecca and Sarai or Sarah. And when you read that book, it talks about her. And I've listened to some other teachers that she was actually Dinah's daughter. And you knew that? Yeah.
I heard that in another teaching last year or year before.
Oh, really? Okay. Which that would make her that would make her look different than the rest of the Egyptians. Now, how that happened, I don't know. But you hear of Joseph, she's been promised to the Pharaoh's son. And then Joseph comes along and they say, hey man, Potiphar says you're going to be with Joseph. And she's like, I'm not either. That he was a slave and he's been in prison. I'm not doing it. And he comes to her and they have a meal together. They set up a meal for him. And he's like, she goes over to kiss him because they're telling her what she has to do. And he's like, First off, that doesn't happen. Secondly, it's not appropriate. And I would never let your lips, one who worships idols, one who sacrifices dead things that they shouldn't, to even come near my lips or anything else. I cannot marry you. And that broke her heart. And she immediately went on a 7-day fast, and she had an encounter with Yah and destroyed every idol, was repentant. She went in that at the end of, and guess what happened because of that? If you read this book, first off, the prayers that she prayed in there are just,
Where is it? Is it in
you can get it from the Sefer. You actually download it. I downloaded it for free at Sefer. I was like, that's a freebie. I'm reading it. So, and free is good, right? And with that, she destroyed every vestige of the pagan life that she once knew. And in the midst of that, her family disowned her because of it. They said, you are no longer our daughter. And she says, I'm alone. Joseph rejected me. Now I've given up the lifestyle. They've rejected me. And what am I to do? And of course, Joseph had his encounters too. You just have to read the book. And they got together, and they had already had kids and everything by the time this all is occurring. So this isn't like, oh, they got into town and Joseph's now king, and the king and has these kids. And it's actually, when you read the book, it talks about Joseph reigned for 48 years when Potiphar died as the only Pharaoh, or whatever you want to say. So if that book has any merit, Joseph was reigning in this country long after, and he actually became sort of the father to Pharaoh's younger son, because the other son tried to kill him. That's a whole nother deal. Anyway, along with Gad and Dan and Naphtali, and anyway. But I gave you that background because it gives us this other idea about relationship. How God can encounter, even no matter how far out of the loop, out of the picture our family, our friends, our loved ones are, how alienated they are from us, how alienated you are from them. Because let's face it, how many here or online have lost family and loved ones and people they think you're crazy? I know church members that have been a part of this congregation before that think we are in a cult. And if you guys know me at all, once you come through those doors, you're my family. And yes, I've lost other family, but that has also happened. But it gives this idea of prayer and fasting and relationship, and how God can move despite the circumstances. Because let me tell you, that's some miraculous circumstances when you read the possibility of the relationship, and how Joseph got together with his wife, how she became the mother, and just in line with all the rest of the matriarchs. Because think about all the matriarchs, they loved Yah. I heard someone ask questions, not from this group, but they said, well, Joseph had all those idols around him. How did he take it? No, Joseph didn't. Because don't you think Yah is big enough to change somebody when they're in darkness in your home? And that's what happened. If you look through that. And Johanna, that is Yosef and Asenath, and it's in the Sefer. You can download it for free online. So it's not really real big, but it's there. So let's continue with what's going on here as we took that little sidestep. And by the way, I'm also going to leave the last 15 minutes, or at least 15 minutes, where we can have a Q&A where y'all can it can be non-questions, just out of the blue. Hopefully Pastor will be with us so he can also answer the questions. So let's look at this one more time. Then Judah approached him, Vayigash. And then we also see later on that Joseph could no longer restrain himself, and he wept out loud. So 2 days, just 2 days prior, in Genesis 43, the brothers were standing before Joseph, and he's overwhelmed, but he kept holding back his tears because he didn't want anybody to see. He wanted to be the strong guy. And we've got to realize there is no part of him that looked Hebrew. He would have had an interpreter interpreting everything the guys were saying. He didn't need it, but he wasn't going to let them know, because as far as he knew, his brothers were still jerks. They were.
Still wanted him dead.
Yeah, and they still wanted him dead. And so every part of him looked like it was Egyptian. Now I'm going to ask this question. If Joseph looked like he was Egyptian, but he was a great man of God, but he was concealed, was he concealed by Egypt, or was he concealed by the Father? Okay.
Because he'd been in Egypt, he was beginning to look like the Egyptians.
Well, I think he had to. I mean, the minute he came out of prison, they shaved him, did whatever they do, Egyptianized him.
Well, he got new clothing.
New clothing, which is, what does new clothing represent? It's a status change. Okay. Is there anyone else in the Word that looks like somebody they're not? Moses is one. What did Moses do? He was raised in the palace, but he was Hebrew. He was hidden inside Egypt until the time was right. But he was a tool of God. Who placed him there? God or man? Okay. Is there anybody else?
Maybe King David, because he was skinny and scrawny and a kid, and he was the king.
Well, he did, but he wasn't dressed in the world's clothes.
Oh, right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
I think you were over there. Did you have? Yes, I was wanting you to get. I was like, yes, Esther. Huh?
Didn't Miriam put him on that thing?
On Moses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, his mom floated him down the river, but it was up to Yah to place him in the palace. Because let me tell you, Moses had to go into the palace so that he would begin to think not as a slave, but he would begin to think as a ruler. Because as long as we have slave mentality and we call ourselves Hebrew and we're still walking around with a slave mindset, we can't go or do anything we're supposed to do. And again, this Torah portion is showing us that. So we look at Esther. Esther looked like what? A woman of Persia, a beautiful queen, princess, a queen. But was she a woman of God?
Yes.
Okay. So who put her there? God or man? I think in Joseph's case, in all of them, I think God is the one that puts you there. So let me ask this question. I heard this, and this is going to be up for debate, I'm sure. We always blame, if we're going on this line, Moses, Esther, Joseph, and go down, and there's others. If we say God put him there and he used the circumstances, he hid a man or woman of God in the midst of Egypt, in the midst of the world, till it was time for them to be revealed. God did that.
Well, they had to learn the law. Moses had to know the law in order to write the Torah.
Well, that's true. But if God is hidden these people in the garb of the world, is it God or the Christians that have dressed Yeshua differently? It's just a thought. We blame our brothers, our sisters, but who is the one that has hidden him in a different garb with a different name? Remember, Esther, different name. Joseph, different name. Is it God, Yahweh, who hid his son, who hid his manifest presence on earth until the time for it to be revealed to the people? It's a thought, isn't it? We blame everybody else. We blame constant. And yeah, they're doing what they do. They're of the world and they're sinning and doing their thing. But who hid Yeshua away until the time? Joy.
But if you believe that Yehovah, as I call him, is sovereign, then that's exactly right, because he is sovereign. Nothing's going to happen that he is not in with, especially when it comes to his son. So that's a very good thought. Very good thought. So we need to stop blaming people and just praising the Father that, he's going to be revealed.
He's going to be revealed to Judah. He's going to be revealed to our brothers in the church. Daryl.
God doesn't look on the physical, he looks on the heart, the spiritual. So you can be dressed in any kind of clothes and still be God.
That's absolutely true. But the difference here is we have a king that we have dressed. When I say we, I'm just talking people in general, have dressed differently. We dress Joseph differently. Esther was dressed differently. And so we think they're one thing, but they're really another because God hid them away. It's just some thoughts.
We look on the outside.
Because yes, we do, but it also should help us with our relationship. One of the things in this Torah portion that if we go on, if I get there, is this is about coming back together, being reunited with our brothers. And our brothers are not just Judah. Our brothers are not just at Life of Worship. They're in other groups. They are our brothers and sisters that are sitting in the pews on Sunday. Not everybody sitting in those pews has a heart that's just playing church.
No.
There are people like my mother-in-law, like my sister-in-law, like my father-in-law who's no longer here, like my dad, who loved Yah with all their heart, but they didn't have all the info. But yet we have this tendency to mark an X. Oh, you worship on Sunday? Stay away from me. But how do we become salt if there's not relationship?
By your conduct, you will. I've taken people to Catholic services that didn't have a ride, sit in the service room. They didn't jump out and bring me down or anything. I knew what I was seeing. I knew what was going on. They needed a ride. And I've also celebrated Ramadan. But they were breaking the fast of Ramadan. I was eating good Eastern food. They were doing what they were doing.
I'm glad you said that, because I was a home care nurse and I took care of a lady from Iraq. They had been brought over here and she needed nursing care, and I went to her home every day. She was so gracious. And they would offer me some of that very sweet coffee. It was so good. And I drank it out of their little cups. And I think it was during Ramadan. I don't know if they were fasting, but they
They do.
So,
They do a semi-fast. It's not really a full fast.
whatever. But anyway, I just thought she was a very sweet, gracious lady. I loved her. I know she doesn't know my Yeshua. And we didn't have a language thing going because she didn't speak much English, but I really liked her.
Well, we've got to remember, even our air brothers, when you go, you have those that are like we know and like we think everybody is. But when you go into the land and you have them, they're just like us.
It's bad. Yeah.
Chris, you were going to say something?
Well, when you were saying about, we put the eggs on Sunday, but I know we're not supposed to hate nobody. He says that any of those who try to climb up in another way, they're deep in the rock. So, those are not our words, but his. That he is the only way. He is the door into the sheepfold.
He is the door.
So, what we've been looking into this past week is we have to accept that what they've chose is what they've chosen. We're not to hate them, but we still got to make a stand, and we still shouldn't compromise.
We don't compromise.
But you still love them.
Yeah.
You still love them.
You hate their action, but you love them.
You don't hate the people, you hate the system.
Yeah. So we still, we're learning this, it's just like, we don't push no hate, we just have to learn that there's a boundary.
There's a boundary.
So you got to sometimes
Threshold.
when they come to you, you know, they want to conversate or debate or whatever, however people call it, get ready. It's good, but to chase them down is another thing. I'm learning that because I got a lot of families that believe different.
Right.
But we're in this chapter right here, chapter 10. And
Well, and here we are. You have all those kind of people in your family. I have some people in my family. I'm sure we all do. And this is about that relationship being restored. Joseph has to go off and hide his tears. Don't you know part of him longed to have a family that was normal, that all loved each other? But yet he had to be who he was. And it wasn't until Judah convinced him and said, hey, my dad could die if we don't do this. Then Joseph broke and he reveals himself. But here's this pattern here. There are people in our lives that should be a part of our lives that have been separated for whatever reason. And our heart longs and our hearts mourn for them.
I still don't think he was quite sure, because before they left, after they had reconciled, so don't quarrel among yourselves while you're going.
I think he knew. He's like, my brothers fight with each other all the time. And I thought that too.
this is like saying they basically hated him because he was in truth.
Don't people hate you when you're in truth?
And they envy because they envy what they don't understand.
Yeah.
They think they
And we've been blessed to get a taste of it,
think
and they
you
haven't
make them
because
look bad.
this ain't right. Their dedication is somewhere else. Their allegiance is somewhere else. So that is why, you know, we're blessed here to just get a taste of the things that we do grasp every week. You know? So,
I think not everybody wants to self-reflect either, so if
No.
somebody points something out, it's just taken as an attack instead of a healthy.
yeah,
Right.
they always-
It's not what I wanted.
Hey, John, would you send, hey, Al, it's so good to see you. Can you get Al's email and send him notes, forward your notes along? If you would do that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, Al, it's good to see you. Be looking for some notes. And if there's anybody else, because we've got a room full, just let me know if you need notes, and we'll have Pastor John or John for you guys. We'll have him forward the notes. Okay, so let's talk about this words that Joseph restrained himself. Okay, lahi, this fa'ach or fa'fa. Here you have this word. It's meaning to hold back or control yourself. We need to remember that this word restrain, that these tears that Joseph had to hold back, they are literally like a dam about to burst. Because can you imagine? There's so many emotions. There's emotion of upset part. You want to hate him and you want to love him at the same time, and you don't know which one. But it's still emotion. So there are 2 points that really connect us with a number of things. But one of them goes with, and he went into his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out and he restrained himself. And then the other point is at the very conclusion where it talks about him restraining himself. And then he wept aloud. But these points are really connected by 2 lines. What are they? One that's purposefully revealed to the brothers, and you follow, hey, here's the events, and it's going A, B, C, D. And Joseph was following the instruction. Joseph's the one that put the cup in there, had his people do it. Joseph's the one that's putting them to the test. But then Judah is sacrificing himself with this speech. But there's this second hidden idea right here that you don't necessarily see with the natural eye, but it's a straight line connecting Joseph, who is secretly weeping, with Joseph, who is openly weeping. Oh, Carlos and Raina, it's so good to see you. Okay, I am so excited. Guys, get your bulletin and get your notes, and there's stuff over there. Hey, Samuel. Okay, there's some people at Life of Worship I hadn't seen in a while, and I'm so excited. For those that don't know, Pastor John's dad died this week. Hey there, sweetie. Mwah. And so that's why he's in Houston right now with his mom and his sister. So yeah, that's why you got me, but it's okay, right? So let's look at a repentant heart, because what does a repentant heart do to you when somebody's wronged you or hurt you? What does it do when somebody says, man, I'm so sorry?
It forgives.
It forgives. I remember I've had people literally on this stage right here. It's been years and years because we've been around since September 25th of 2005. But I've had people from this stage in here come around and tell me, Sandi and John, but especially Sandi, and you name every cuss word in the book. And this was on when we were about to have service. And do this and this and this and this and this. And they would leave, and they had this pattern. This person had this pattern of doing this. They would do it about every January.
They have issues with New Year's.
But it's spiritual. It's a spiritual battle. And then they would come back, and it always broke my heart. It always just devastated me. But in about 6 months, 8 months, they'd come back and they'd say, I'm sorry, I was messed up. This and this. And I'd be like, oh, it's okay. Come on. Because it melted me, just that, because I forgave immediately or I was disobeying the word. When are you supposed to forgive? You wait till somebody asks it? 70 times 7. But there's something beautiful that happens when we ask forgiveness from the Father, but when you go to your brother and say, hey, Joy, when I'm a jerk, forgive me. And I'm a jerk a lot. So just give me a lot of forgiveness. Raina.
I want to ask you, so do you really think like people at that moment just say, oh, forgive me, Father, for what they've done? I think that we kind of like, react a certain way, and then we think about it, and then we're like, oh, well, I forgive that person. They take like a brief moment, you could say, to kind of like, you don't know how
To find yourself in it.
Yeah.
Balance, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you're redneck Chris.
Sometimes when people do that, in my heart, I feel like, man, Father, I forgive them. But now I need you to help me to stand on that forgiveness so that when they come to me, they won't see a different change in my demeanor. Like, just, okay, don't worry about it. Just whatever. And let it flow, right? So that way they don't second guess what they did at the right moment.
That's good.
Because sometimes don't you have to keep forgiving sometimes minute by minute, depending on
Yes.
what God's going on in your head. I mean, that's the way I am.
Yes.
I really mind.
We know that people can touch our hearts. And we know that Judah touched Joseph's heart, Yehuda. Which, what does Yehuda's name mean in Hebrew? Thanksgiving, praise, right? So when we look at this verb lahadot, and I don't know if that's in your notes or not, Lehodot, and it means to, all right, to thank or praise as well. So here we are with this verb, but it has another meaning to it besides just thank and praise, which we don't hear this word very often. It is, when you, in this understanding, it means to admit or to confess. Guys, we don't often say that or look at that with Yehuda, Judah, meaning that. Yes. And Joe said, forgive even when not asked. And yes, absolutely. That's what we need moving. Hey, Al, if you could get John your email, unless you don't want to put it on this stream, you don't have to, but this stream will be removed tomorrow, probably. So in other words, the chat will be removed. So here we have lahadot, to confess. And we have, there's a special prayer that we do of confession. Does anybody remember what it is? It's the Vidui. Do y'all remember that? We go through that. We have many times in the past. But it has that same root of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. So here's this idea of confession. And we see confession as an aspect of Judah's character now here in this story. So not only is praise and going first, Judah goes first, praise goes first. So we have this idea in the midst of whatever we're dealing with and the people we're dealing with that we need to praise Yah. And maybe we need to praise Yah for them, because sometimes there's parts of our life that need a little sandpaper to rub the icky parts off, right? To grind them down. Does anybody have any area of your life that might need a little bit of not need a sandpaper person? Yeah.
Maybe a tad.
Yeah. You come, and if you're ever in front of somebody, you go, oh, I just don't want to be around them. That's sandpaper, and you probably need to be with those people because you need some sandpaper people in your life. But here you have this idea that so we praise Yah for who he brings into our life, but we also have this prayer of confession, this idea of confessing. And Judah's character, he had some stuff he went through just like we do. I mean, we just got through talking about Tamar and Judah. So we had that whole mess, that whole debacle. But here's something very important. Judah becomes the very first person in Torah to admit his sin and guilt. Is that an example to us?
Yes.
Supposed to be.
What keeps us from saying I'm sorry? What keeps us from admitting where we're wrong? Pride. Yes. So in order for Joseph to release his restrained tears, there needed to be a Judah. There needed to be an admission of guilt. There needed to be a confession. There needed to be a person with a repentant heart who was ready to approach Joseph so that he, and even lay down his life for his brother. Now, only then does Joseph let his tears flow. Only then does Messiah, son of Joseph, reveal himself to his brothers, falling on the neck of Benjamin and weeping. Only then when Judah comes along and says, man, I've rejected Yeshua. He was right there. You dressed him differently and talked about him differently and celebrated different days, so I couldn't see him. But all of a sudden, he sees him. And don't you know, there's going to be a day when Judah comes to even Ephraim and says, man, come, let's be brothers. Let's be brothers. Can you imagine the power of this kingdom, of Yah's kingdom, when we're united? I just think it's amazing. Let's look at Genesis 45, verses 4 through 8, if somebody would read that. Bob, you should have notes.
And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God hath sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt.
Does that sound like Joseph, if he didn't know before, all of a sudden he has insight and he says, I forgive you. So he receives that. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, or if you want to call him, I guess he was made Lord over there in Britain or whatever. But so Lord Jonathan Sachs says that this long dramatic pause when Joseph's brothers plead for their brother and Benjamin's life, and then he reveals himself. He says it's a moment of true forgiveness. Of course, as we said, it's the first one in the Torah. There was reconciliation before us between Isaac and Esau, but not true forgiveness. So when we've seen reconciliation all the times in the past, which I think the big one is it's Jacob and Esau, wouldn't you say? I mean,
Yeah.
and we've seen these relationships, these broken relationships, but we've never really witnessed true forgiveness in all of this. I mean, we see Sarah being upset with Hagar, et cetera, that whole thing, but we never really hear stories like this. We hear about others and we don't hear stories like this. But it's this idea, if we're going to mend relationships, even if we're not sure we wronged somebody, or here's the hard part. You're upset. Let's give an example. Tracy says, I'm upset with Sandi and I have no clue why she's upset, but I must have said or did something. What should we do if we're doing it as the word says? Should Tracy go to Raina and Carlos and Daryl and Janet?
She should go to you.
How do we do that? What do we usually do?
We go to everybody.
We go to everybody else except the person we're upset with. And what happens with that? But it destroys relationships, and then it even destroys the idea of that person in their eyes.
You gotta have a little courage. If you want
And
to
by the way, that hasn't happened. I pulled her out because I was staring at her. So I hope it hasn't happened. But for any of us, we have got to work on this idea of true forgiveness. And I will say this, Jonathan, our son, has always represented that. Jonathan is one who will forgive you before you ask. And he forgives almost instantaneously. Now I'll give you an example. Or sometimes in the heat of the moment, Mom, and we're sitting there and it's back and forth, and he goes off into his room, but within 2 minutes he's back and he's like, Mom, I'm sorry. I've even gotten into the phone on, where he's at right now. And I said, Jonathan, have you spent 6 hours in the Word today? No, I've only spent 2. I'm like, you need to be in the Word because this is the best time, Mom, why do you, I don't need it. Anyway, sometimes we have those conversations and it goes here and and I'm like, well, Jonathan, or he'll say, Mom, I don't like it when you did this or something, because he'll tell me. And so I say, Jonathan, if you're going to correct me when I'm on the phone, I'm not talking to you any longer. I love you. Goodbye. Click. And about 2 minutes later, again, he does that same thing. He calls and says, you know what? I know that you're doing your best on that side. You shouldn't have. But I've always been impressed with that part of his character, because it's an example of what we should be doing. We should forgive when not asked. And maybe we should ask forgiveness before it's required. It's a thought, because what happens? Only with repentance can there be true forgiveness. Only with repentance can there be a healing of relationship. Because what does the enemy come to do with every relationship you have? And that includes in this body. Folks, I'm telling you, if the enemy can separate this family, he wants to. Why? Because you don't, when you're battling in your family, when you're battling in your congregation, if you're doing stuff, then the enemy is going to come and try to separate you out from each other. But that's the time when you come closer and you don't let little things get in the way. See, the brothers had to acknowledge what they did. They had to regret their actions. They had to change their behavior. Sachs says that's the difference between guilt and shame. How many times do we may feel guilty about something, but we're not ashamed of it? Tell me what the difference is in our actions in those two areas. Don't care. I always heard this, and you can use your kids and grandkids the best for it. You're guilty, you got caught, but you're not ashamed or sorry that you did it.
That's good, yeah.
There is a difference between getting caught and repenting.
It's true. That's true. So when you make that distinction between guilt and shame, true repentance is possible because the stain on the behavior, the stain is on the behavior, not on the individual. Okay, so let's say that I did this thing. Who should I pick out? I did this thing to Jackie and Regina. I did this thing to him and I hurt him. And I knew it. And so, but then God gets a hold of me and spanks me, says, Sandi, you need to make it right. And I realize, wow, I really hurt him and I should have thought about things differently. And I go to them. That stain of my action should rest on the individual or that behavior.
One thing that I've been told that shows spiritual growth is on the other side of that, don't be easily offended.
Amen. Please don't be easily offended.
I had a very righteous woman tell me that
it's not exactly them, it's what they've let in through the door. The demonic comes in, and just think of that when you're trying to forget them. Well, maybe there's something going on with this person spiritually that they've let in that is demonic. They've got something demonic. And
It's
are we
true.
oppressed by demons? No. But you can let in that spirit, not exactly to let it in, but it's got something to do spiritually that happens when we open the door to sin, because you're in the enemy's territory.
You are.
So you're walking in that, you're walking in that partially. You're double-minded.
We don't war against flesh.
That's what I was about to say. But against powers and principalities and
Yes,
rulers in
yes.
high places. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty to the pulling down of
Yes.
strongholds.
So
We've got to remember that when we are upset with one another, with our brother, with whomever, somebody in our family, we remember first, we know who the author is that's going to try to separate us out from our family, to break us apart. And then we realize that we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We are not fighting against flesh and blood. And that stain, when we ask forgiveness, that we shouldn't have to walk around with Sandy did this to Regina and Jackie, so I have to wear that scarlet letter. It's the behavior. And when we forgive, we let it go. How hard is it to let go when you forgive? Chris?
I remember we did this last year, and about the principalities and stuff. And in the Ephesians chapter 6, it says the principalities are the accusers of your mind, and the rulers and authorities tempt you with pride of heart, and powers are the liars and deceivers, and the wicked are the ones that oppress your walk, and they try to stop you from walking into destruction. It came from Brother Elias.
Yeah, I remember that.
I wrote that down. I was like, we're gonna start saying that.
I remember watching. I don't ever get to see it like this, but I go through, if you guys don't know, the first day of the week, every Sunday morning, starting about 5:30 a.m., I go through these things. So anyway, but I remember hearing that, and that's a good idea. But I have this question. So if everything is bad in your life, or no, well, let's start the other side first. When everything's good in your life, is it easier to forgive?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's say, would Joseph have been as forgiving if he wasn't successful in Egypt? What if he was still in the prison? What if he was he didn't have the rise in status, but he was, or maybe he's out of prison, but he's on the streets? Would he have been as forgiving? It's a thought. Chris.
Well, I mean, if you look at the story, the father was with him the whole time, so it's not going to matter which environment he's in because he stayed true to the way. So, I don't know, I would say he still would be forgiven because he knows he has to.
Would we?
Oh,
Because no, you're right. I did ask that. I did. Joseph, I think, would have done that right. But does forgiveness depend on the status of the one who was wronged? When we're down and out, when the world is crushing and pressing on us, are we as forgiving as we should be when everything's going good?
I can't, but I'll speak about it here and there. To let it be known. Forgiven, yeah.
Depends on how long you've been at it.
Well, and it's like Chris said.
Been around for a few years, it's just another day in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Chris says, you got to remember who sets the rules and who you going to obey.
Who are you
okay?
going to obey?
Yeah.
Hey, Michael Blank, it's good to have you, but we would love to have you in the house today. So that's good.
It works in.
Okay, well, he's on here too. So, okay, so is the true measure of forgiveness, is it that willingness of that injured party to separate that pain, that real pain, that real hurt from the stories and truths built up around them? Think about that. We build up, when we're hurt, we have this tendency to build up stories around our pain. We need to watch that. We have this idea that this lack of forgiveness, I think the offense muscle in our lives, the holding a grudge because we were rightfully wrong gets more workout than our forgiveness muscle. Of course, they're not muscles, but I'm trying to be. We have this tendency, as you said, we should not pick up an offense. Actually, offense is sin. I had a person when we were in our other building. She came to me and she was offended because I said, my young male adult cannot take your youth girl home. And I said, that will not happen. Well, they're friends of the family, and she got very, very offended by this thing. So offended that she stopped coming. And I said, you can't take offense to this. It's hard being a pastor, especially when you have to bring correction and love. I said, that's not good for him or her. It's not good for you. It's not good for life of worship. And she says, I can be offended if I want. And I said, offense is a sin. And she said, show me where in the word. And of course I did. Daryl.
In every congregation I've ever been associated in, there's always somebody looking for offense.
Exactly. Why? Why are we looking to be offended? Because the enemy wants us to separate from each other. Because what happens if Chris isn't here? Would I have been able to resolve everything that needed resolved today without Chris here? Not in the same manner. If y'all aren't here and I'm not going to minimize Chris's job at Life of Worship or his importance, because everybody here has been called. Everybody online is part of this congregation, and we all have a purpose and a place. And without one another, even if we're elsewhere or we're doing something else or going somewhere else, it causes that place where you've been called, because you go where God's called you. It causes that group to be less than what they're supposed to be, because we all are the body. We're missing an ear or a finger or our heart or an arm or a leg. We're not going to function as we should function. And so the enemy wants to make us so we are missing parts because of offense, unforgiveness, whatever the case, because we're exercising those muscles more than others. So that's something we need to look at as well. Now, of course, let me skip down here to see what I want to skip. So hold on just a minute. In this idea of this story, I want us to go back and relate some of the things to the Garden of Eden. What? Joseph in the Garden of Eden? What are you talking about? Well, let's bring some connections here. Because Joe said, if you do not forgive, you are not truly wearing the sandal of shalom. You need to forgive in order to be able to stand. Yes. Okay. So we have here, when we see this story, again, we're not going to rehearse the story, but since we're talking about relationships, there's this reminiscent idea that goes all the way back to the garden. So we know Joseph frames Benjamin. Okay. So the connection begins with Judah's explanation as to why Benjamin can't stay behind in Egypt. Benjamin, of course, didn't do the goblet. Joseph says he needs to stay behind as a thief and become his slave. And Judah steps up and begins to speak and says that's not going to be allowed to happen. So here's what said. The lad is unable to leave his father. Leave his father. Let's look at Genesis 2:24. Anybody? Oh, sorry. I should have said somebody read it. I've just been sitting here waiting like I needed some music going. So. In this phrase right here, to leave his father, we've heard it right here in the garden. And what's it used to describe? Marriage. Okay, so why are we using the same phrase for marriage that we are for these other relationships? Let's see. Okay, so la azov et aviv, leaving behind father. And we have it showing up again in Judah's speech about Benjamin. He cannot leave his father. Okay. So are there other ideas? Are there other ideas that we also see that will relate us back to the beginning? that would relate us back to this kind of relationship. So we see in Genesis 44:20 that Joy previously read, his brother is dead, so he alone remains of his father. He alone remains. That phrase, lavado, okay? So is there any phrase like that back in the garden? Well, of course there is, right? So Adam was lavado. It means alone. Adam was alone. We have this idea. He alone remains of his mother's sons, right? It's just Benjamin, as far as they know. It's just Benjamin that's alive. So it has this idea of being alone. So what did Yah do for Mr. Adam? Because remember, when they were created, Mr. and Mrs. Adam alone, he created them in his image, male and female, he created them. So we have in the human, Mr. Adam, this idea, Mr. and Mrs. Adam are already one. And he removed from that one-to-one concept, he removed Mrs. Adam from his side to walk side by side. So now there was two. So now it's not one being, it's two. So we still have this idea of what? Yes, but yes, absolutely. But we have this idea in these words that are being used here in this Torah portion in chapter 44, this idea that's relating back to marriage in the garden. Why would it relate back to marriage? Is it because Benjamin isn't getting married? Nobody's romantic here, right? So why are there echoes in this Torah portion back to the beginning? So when we see that Adam is alone, he's about to be with Mrs. Adam. What does Mrs. Adam do for him when she is separated from him? She completes him. Okay? Benjamin too, he's alone and he doesn't know it, but he's about to meet the only brother that he has of his mother that will complete him. They can talk about mom. They can talk about dad. They can relate to things because they're truly brothers. He's got other brothers too, but you guys understand that's the same mom. There's something there. There's something there. Benjamin is alone and he's about to meet his brother. He and Yehuda are about to discover that Joseph is the brother, which means that each of these people, Adam on one hand and Benjamin on the other, there's something else. There's a part of them that was missing and now is found. For Adam, it was Mrs. Adam. Without her, he's missing something. For Bonnie right now, John's mom, though they're dealing with his dad's death, they've been together for so many years. So I can tell you from watching my mom walk through this, that when you're missing that other half, your spouse, watching my mom, it's like you're literally missing part of you because you're one flesh.
Like you're not whole.
And so we've got to have this idea that these relationships are that important. And when you go to marriage, man was once as part of his father and mother, but he was given this job that he needed to go start his own family and have a father and mother and kids, and it would continue the lineage. That's what you do, and that's what completes you. So
it gives us an example too of who we're supposed to be in Yeshua. Our relationship. It's about relationships. Our relationship with Yeshua. It should be you and him first.
It should be you and him. But when we're looking at these relationships, because there's so many different angles to look at all the relationships in this Torah portion today, I'm going to ask you this question. Is there anybody missing in your life, in your family, whether it's estrangement, whether it's imprisonment, or some other loss, but they should be there beside you? And then I'm going to ask you this question. Do you feel complete without them?
No, you'll never feel the same again.
You've lost a son. I can tell you right now, when I was looking at this and thinking about these things, about how there's part of us that might be, there's part of us that might be missing. Is there a part of us in this congregation right now that is missing that should be here?
Yes. Jonathan.
I mean, there's many,
Yes, that's true.
but for
Oh,
me,
yeah.
the one particularly right now,
Yeah.
and by the way, well, John today, but Jonathan. Jonathan should be part of this congregation. You guys name your people. They should be part of this family, but you guys have people that are missing from your personal family as well as this family. Do you feel complete without them? John and Jonathan and I work together like this in this congregation.
You're like a braid of hair.
I'm telling you,
Three strands.
if John and I needed to take off for this reason or that reason, we wouldn't hesitate to dump everything on Jonathan's shoulders. And you know what? He would handle it every time without question. He'd do worship, he'd do Torah portion, he'd do message. But Jonathan also, you know what we got him to do a lot of? The grunt work. The heavy lifting, the grunt work, the cleaning up, the do it. And you know what? He always just did it. But he didn't just do that. He was integral for us. And part of us, and I'm not the wife and the daughter, and that's even more so. That's even a deeper relationship where part of that's missing. We have Killian and Amarillo that have been walking that out. You're missing your son.
Yep. And it's a gap.
And
there's a gap there.
There's a gap.
And
You're-
even in relationships, the Lord talks about this. When you sleep with more than one person, let's just be frank here, you're never going to forget them. You have to go in and break that.
There's soul ties.
But those soul ties pop up. It's just, and so think of the seriousness of somebody you're around every day, like Jonathan, or for my instance, Chad. It's never, till Jonathan gets back, Sandy's not going to be whole again. Okay, that's what it boils down to. But you learn how to deal with it with Yeshua. That's when Yeshua comes in real handy.
By the way, it's over on the 16th. Then we just got to wait for him to come home. January 16th, it's over.
Praise you, Lord. We knew he'd get here, but it's like
we were hoping he would get out early. He didn't. Well, I mean, he's still going to be, there's still a year and a half on the sentence, but they start processing the paperwork. I hope it's quick on the 16th. And then we need to pray that whatever needs to happens so he can join us here. Because there's, as some of you may know, there's other hoops you have to jump through once you get out. So anyway, that's my point is, guys, is that this idea of relating this family relationship for Benjamin and Joseph, or even for the brothers, or dad, or mom, or Jonathan in our case, or Chad, or guys in your own lives, families, members.
Right,
there's part of us missing, and we're not the same without them.
That's right.
Can anybody?
But
Yes,
you adjust,
Terry.
But it's not an easy
When
adjustment.
I was growing up, everywhere we went, it was mother and daddy and I. And when it was just me and dad, when we were in the car, I stood right here behind him until I got old enough that I needed to sit down. But that was my place. And when mother came, I couldn't sit between them. I always had to sit out on the edge like an outsider. Within the last year, since going through chemo and cancer, I've been talking to my oldest sister, and she told me, you have no idea how important you were to mother. I know you always felt like an outsider, but that was because mother loved Scooter so much that she even asked me one time if I thought God took him because she loved him too much. And that's not something Carolyn could answer.
No.
But
He's a child of his, and you're a child of
mother,
his.
I've heard her just absolutely grieving herself to death. And Carolyn talked to her and told her, said, you can't do that. You still have Terry to raise. And God put her there for a reason. And she, in part, got over it, but she never truly got over the loss of my daddy. Me, on the other hand, he was my best friend. And I had it for 9 years. And I'm still not over it. And when mother died, then I had the loss of her too. Because we had become best friends. I knew mother inside and out. I knew when she was hurting and when she was okay. I could, going through massage training, I could work on her hips or her shoulder from using a cane.
Yes.
And I didn't hurt her like other people did.
Right. Right.
And she talked to my sister. No, Terry's got it done. And I'm like, oh. Because there
Right.
was always a wedge between me and my two sisters and brother. And I found out why, but that I had nothing to do with that. It had something to do with the way things were within mother's will.
Well, let's not get into all the details there,
No.
but it is the example of relationship and loss.
Yes.
And sometimes, of course, in this case, it was wrongdoing that caused the separation. And that does cause loss too, even if there's separation that way.
Yeah.
And Joe brought out, and of course, we need to go there. How much more should it be with our relationship with Yeshua? Because ultimately,
You're gonna die just like you did every time, and that's a good example. What Terry's talking about, and my son, and just not Jonathan, not being. You're going to go through things like he did on the cross. You're going to have to die with things. You die with it, but then you rise up.
but here's my point on that, and you're right. We need to be that intimate with him because this Torah portion's about drawing near. And of course, we're going to talk a lot more about that in the next part at 3:00, but there should be drawing near with Yeshua. We should feel so empty. How many of you do when you haven't spent time with him in the day and all of a sudden it's a week? How many of you feel a loss? And if we don't, then maybe we need to check some things in our life because we don't act the same and we don't think the same. I can tell you, spending time with Yah, it changes your perspective on the things that come along the way in your life. How much more that relationship. Now, one more time, we're going to look. I know we're sticking on this relationship thing, but there's a reason. So then he approached Vayigash. And it goes on, it says, do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to Pharaoh. Joseph and Judah are also representing two completely different missions here on this earth. Maybe they're competing missions, all the same. Judah and Joseph, two houses. It's prophetic. It is very prophetic. Judah repeatedly calls himself a servant in this Torah portion. I'm your servant, servant, servant. And he speaks this word to Joseph. He tells Joseph he is like who? Who did I just read? He says, you're like Pharaoh. And then he says, Joseph, don't be angry. Oh, so what does that mean? Joseph, don't be angry like Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh represents what to Judah? He represents the world. In rabbinic sources, they regard that Joseph represents Israel's responsibility to be a light to the nations. See, we're going to talk more about relationship. To be a light to the nations. Would you say that's true? Because let's look at it here. You're Joseph. Do we have a responsibility to be a light to the nations?
Yep.
And Judah represents the nation's responsibility for Torah, to know that word. Would you say that's a true statement? Because you need what? Can we just be a light without the Torah, without his word, without his instruction? No. Chris?
I mean, we can talk it all day long, but if we're studying it, in that study, we should ask the Father how to show us to apply. Because if you don't have a chance to talk to this person, but they see you from a distance, they'll be able to tell by the way you carry yourself, the way you do things. So it's not just that, it's physical for the life. So, what else did he say? It says, yeah. some of my family, they hear about what we believe, but they don't really realize it until they're actually witnessing this. Because by the way we talk about the things we don't do, you know, it's just how we carry ourselves differently. And there's just a lot of stuff that comes with it. You know, I mean, they ask me about these all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and you got to break it down to them so that way they understand. But when you tell them, they really don't understand because it's not a change in them, it's a change in you. So, I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
Well, when you get it in, jump in, because I want to elaborate. Just jump in. Just say, hey, and I'll stop. Because let's look at what we've actually done prophetically. If this is true, now this is coming from rabbis that say this, but what have we been known? What is Ephraim in the U.S., specifically the U.S., but even beyond that, been known for? We go to other nations to spread the word. We have this idea to go, go, go. I'll use the example. John's parents have done mission work all over the world. They'd have vacation and they say, let's go minister. I'd be like, I need vacation. But that's not what they did. Russia, India, all over. John himself traveled and did the same. Yugoslavia when it was a country and different things. There's this idea, Ephraim wants to be a light to the nations. And I do not know two other people besides Dan and Bonnie Craig, John's parents, that have done that. They've done that more than anybody without pay. They just do it. Of course, missionaries don't usually have that, but they would go all over the world to spread the word of Yah and to be his hands and feet. That's important too, because sometimes people need that food on the table or that something else before they can even hear. But we're not going there right now. So, but what has Judah done? Yehuda, Judah, the Jewish people have said, Torah, Torah, Torah. We're not going to, now, yeah, we're not talking about what they've added and all of that, but they have kept that so we didn't lose it.
Yep, that strand
They
is
have
still
not
alive.
forgotten who they are. Now, I'm not saying you've got Tel Aviv is the biggest capital of something in the world, and we're not going to say the word and things like that. So I'm not talking about that. But in general, they've kept the integrity of the word. And we know that if Torah is a light and the commandment is a lamp, and if the word is a lamp unto our feet, then the word is an equivalent expression to what? The Torah. Yeah. The word, and the word is Yeshua. The Torah is Yeshua. The whole word is Yeshua. So again, we're talking about this close relationship, Yeshua, the word. And we as we just said, Judah and Joseph, that the tribes, that all the tribes have to be together to function. There has to be unity. There has to be healing so that we can truly be effective. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that in pockets, and we're seeing that happen. So don't get me wrong, but there's ways to go still. Judah represents that first level of Yah's unity, that echad. You say that's the Shema, that unity that's manifest to the Torah and his people. Joseph has wanted to sanctify the name among the nations. Joseph has spread the word into the entire world, translated the Bible. Yeah, Joseph looks like the world when he's done it. And when I'm talking Joseph, I'm telling you, the churches have set missionaries all over the world, and it's been going on for quite some time. And we've got to remember that they've been fulfilling a role. So when you have that combined vision, Shema Israel, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then we take this Torah portion. It's telling us of a future where Judah's mission and Joseph's mission, because remember, Joseph was a light to the nations. Hold on. Why do I say, how was Joseph a light to the nations? Back in this Torah portion, or the last Torah portions. Remember, what came into Egypt? The nations. For food. He fed them. He took care of them, and ultimately ended up sheltering them, because Egypt had to. We're going to talk about that here at the end on what happens and relate it to today. But here we have this idea that Joseph literally was a light to the nations. And when Judah draws near to Joseph, that means Judah also bears that testimony of Yeshua or the testimony of others. So when they draw near together, with Judah and Joseph, the Torah draws near to the testimony. The Torah draws near to the to Yeshua. It says in the word that they're going to feast on Leviathan. I need to study that out because I'm like, who wants to? Okay. What are you saying there, God? You're the same yesterday, today, and forever. But there, no. I think it has to be what we have to understand. It's going to take. I'm sure it's already been sought out, but I haven't done it. So let's look at Matthew 8 verse 4 and Matthew 10 verse 18. Actually, just open up to Matthew because we're going to spend a few minutes there.
What's the first one on Matthew?
Matthew 8 4.
And the other one?
Matthew 10 18.
And Yah said to him, see, mention it no more. But go your way, show yourself to the priests, and offer the gift that Moshe commanded as a witness to them.
Or it's a testimony to them as well. A witness, a testimony to them. Matthew 10 18. Anybody?
And you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles.
Okay, so where we have to be a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. Now Matthew 24 14. Yes, yes.
And this gospel, the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come.
Okay, so let's look at these three levels here. First, what do we say? Let them go before the priests and give testimony. Then, where do we go with the message? To rulers.
The world.
Because, it says governors and kings.
Oh, well, yeah.
So the message would go from Judea to the kings or the governors that his disciples would preach. And then lastly, where is it extended to? Where's the testimony go? To the world.
Yes.
So from Judah, what does Joseph represent? The world. So the testimony goes from Judah to the world. And then it returns to Judah back again. So when he draws near to Joseph. So initially, the disciples, what did they do? They brought the testimony to the world. They brought Yeshua to the world. And it's gone throughout the world. Now, in turn, Joseph will bring the testimony back to Judah, to Yehuda, that full circle. And when that returns, even before he recognizes the testimony of resurrection, Judah's going to do it because he doesn't want to lose another brother. He needs his brothers. There's going to be a day and a time, maybe soon, where Judah's going to call out for his brother. He needs his brothers with him. And then we have that weeping on Joseph's shoulder.
Yep.
He doesn't want his father to grieve. Judah's going to see. So what exactly is the testimony of Yeshua? Let's look at Acts 4:33. Acts 4:33. Yes.
On
And
relationship.
Go ahead, Chris.
with great power gave the apostles witness of the resurrection of the Lord Yeshua, and great grace was upon them all.
So if you're going to believe in Yeshua, what's it going to require? Sacrifice. But if you're going to believe, you're going to have to also say there was resurrection. There was a resurrection from the dead.
Yes. You're bringing life.
And you can sort of say Joseph does that. Judah draws near to Joseph even before he knows of resurrection from his, and even though there's been slavery and death, Joseph looks like an Egyptian, as we've talked about. He looks like the world. Revelation 20 verse 4. Let's read that. Acts 4:33. And when we're turning to Revelation 2:24, Jessica has asked for prayer. So we're going to pray. Father, we're going to come before you right now in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. whatever Jessica is dealing with and going through, Father, you know where she's at and what she's dealing with. And Father, what the circumstances around her look like. But you are Yah. Greater are you, Father, you who is in Jessica, you who are in us than he who is in the world. Father, right now, go and make a way where there seems to be no way. Surround her with your glory and your presence so that whatever is affecting her, Father, is taken care of. That, Father, every thought that's not from you, everything that's been planted that's not from you would be gone in Yeshua's name, would be squelched. And Father, the only things that remain are your words and your thoughts that are on her mind. And in every situation, Father, whatever it is, you are the resolution, you are the answer, whether it's relational, whether it's financial, whether it's struggle, Father, in your mind, in your life, in your situation. So Father, you are everything. Send those that can minister directly to her. But Father, right now, let her see a shift in the atmosphere around her.
That's right.
Let worship and praise fill her place. The praise that it is done, it is finished. Yeshua has touched her. Thank you for taking care of Jessica in Yeshua's name. All right. Revelation 20, verse 4. Anybody got it?
And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years.
I missed you.
Yep.
I love you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Here we're talking, and I don't want us to get specific here on anything. I'm just going to talk in general spiritual stuff right now because we're on YouTube. Okay. So here we have this idea that the testimony and the word are not just plain, it's a serious thing in the end times.
Yeah.
It's serious. We've got to have the testimony of Yeshua in our mouths. And we may face death. It may happen.
Come on.
We have to have his word. We have to be filled with the Spirit, period. We can't just say, well, I got a little, because you're not going to receive the mark of the beast by an accident. Yeah, you can do it in it. You can claim ignorance, or you can refuse to research something out or do something, but you can't just, you have to decide, am I going to follow Yah's word or not?
That's a pre-made decision.
It's the only thing going to get you through.
So we need to remember that. So as we spoke of earlier, Leviathan is equivalent to what? The land-based serpent, Nachash, and the Tanin, the dragon, or the modern crocodile. You can look at it like that. We receive the mark when we defy his word and give false testimony. And I was going to include a menorah. Well, not the menorah, the fault. Anyway, I didn't in your notes. I forgot. I was going to do it and I didn't get it in there. So sorry. If you know about giving false testimony, that's the 6th. If you look at the menorah, okay. That doesn't really work, does it? Okay. You look at the menorah. If you look at the 6th branch, of course it's,
Trying to do the wicked lamp.
yeah, the wicked lamp. I was going to put a picture in there for you and I didn't.
Where's
That-
that? That's in Proverbs, right?
Yes, Proverbs 6:16 through 20. But
Hey,
actually, let's read that. Okay, let's read
yeah,
that.
that's a good idea. It's a good idea to know where that is.
Proverbs, let's go to Proverbs 16 through 20. Yeah, Proverbs 6:16 through 20. Let's get it right, Sandy. Speak what you mean. Mean what you speak.
These 6 matters Yah hates, and 7 are abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands shedding innocent blood, a heart devising wicked schemes, feet quick to run to evil mischief, a false witness breathing out lies, y'all, and one who causes strife among brothers.
Okay, I want you to read those again. Say them.
Okay, the 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look,
Right here. Okay. Next.
a lying tongue,
Right here. Next.
and a hand shedding innocent blood.
Right here.
A heart devising wicked schemes.
A heart devising wicked schemes. Right here.
Yep.
Guys, if you're looking at this, I'm not saying the menorah is that. I'm talking about the false lamp. This is just what I got. Okay. Next.
Feet quick to run to evil.
Okay. Oh, I'm going to run and do something bad. Okay. Next. Here's what we're talking about right here. Go ahead.
A false witness, breathing out lies.
Breathing out lies, false witnesses. And then here's the kicker. Once you've been making a lifestyle of this, you literally become, go ahead and read it.
And one who causes strife among brothers.
Oh my.
Right.
So on the wicked lamp is causing strife among brothers. Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
Ouch. The seventh abomination. So here we have this idea, this sixth abomination, to give false testimony. It causes desolation because it separates brothers, especially Judah and Joseph. So in a midrash, it tells us that Ezekiel's bones, dry bones of resurrection, experienced, it actually took place the minute the nations bowed down to Nebuchadnezzar's statue, his self-image.
Yep.
That's what's said. So we have the three that remained standing.
Well, that wicked lamp is the removal or moving of the boundaries.
Moving of the boundary stones.
good.
Yeah, that's true. So when you have the reunion of Judah and Israel, Ephraim and Judah, the two sticks coming together as one, it's part of those dry bones chapters. Ezekiel 37:10 says, so I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they came to life and stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army.
Yep.
So Revelation 12:17, let's read that. Revelation 12:17. Did I not put any of these in your notes? Sorry.
Revelation 12, 14, and 17.
17.
Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the remnant of her seed, who kept the commandments of God and have the testimony of Yeshua.
And that's us. So that's why you're warring. Hello.
Yeah.
Those who obey God's commands and bear witness to Yeshua.
There
Yeah,
you
that's
go.
on the bottom of page 4.
Takes both.
So what's this exceedingly great army of dry bones that rises up?
We are.
It's one who's equipped to make war with the adversary,
That's right.
right? Okay, but the adversary, the enemy hates what?
Us.
He hates the testimony of Yeshua. He hates the testimony of resurrection. He hates the testimony of life. And it's disobedience to the word. That's the beast, everything. It's all about God's word is vile. I was John's been out, as I've been working, I've been rehashing as I've been doing things, rehashing The Chosen. So I've had it on in the house and just going while I've been working. And what that just popped in my mind, because it's so true, and we've seen this in deliverance. The scene when the demoniac kept saying, I smell you. I smell you. See, you have a fragrance about you
That's right.
that is a stench in the enemy's nostrils.
That's why the Lord.
He can't stand it.
That's why the Lord likes our scent comes up to him
Yeah.
in the heavenlies.
Yes. Terry.
Joe has a nephew who is dealing with autism. And he can tell the difference between a store-bought egg and an organic egg.
Wow.
Wow.
Mother bought, because she was out and didn't have time to go talk to their
Right,
mother,
right.
their sisters, bought store-bought eggs. And she heard a noise in the kitchen. He had gotten into the refrigerator. He wanted eggs. And he would take an egg out,
And smell it.
bam, throw it on
Yep,
the floor.
yep.
But
Got
he did not do that to the organic eggs.
To the organic
Wow.
eggs. Well,
That's one thing.
well, guess what? I want you guys to realize that if you're in his kingdom, if you have Yeshua, his testimony, that testimony of resurrection, not only do you have a smell and a fragrance and aroma that surrounds you, there you can see it in your eyes. In fact, you can walk into a room and the enemy is going to be like, ugh. Have you ever had people in your lives that it's immediate friction? Because it's a kingdom against kingdom issue. When the kingdom of Yah enters in, darkness must flee.
That's right.
Now, in the chosen, I think they so well represented sort of a spiritual battle there, because you would be like, oh, and I smell you, I smell you. He couldn't stand it. The enemy can't stand the truth that's in you, Yeshua that's in you, the light of the world.
That's why he fights us.
And so he wants to separate you.
Correct.
He wants to divide you. He wants to destroy relationship.
Like the wolf separating out.
The wolf separating, a lion separating. He goes about seeking whom he may devour. So what we see is the enemy wants to cut you off. He doesn't want you to rise up as an army of one, unified with your brothers or your brothers or your brothers. We can take it from sphere and get bigger and bigger and bigger. The beast
Bless you. Thank you.
wants to squash any recognition of the kingdom. Guys, right now, what do we see around the world? If the beast is trying to squash any recognition of the kingdom, what do we have happening to God's word that we see? Is there a beast rising to squash any remnant or evidence of Yah?
Yes.
Chris.
They're really trying to cover it in their sound doctrine, that the swift teachings of just what's going to make you feel good while you're doing bad. They're not trying to bring correction or instruction. They're just telling you have to keep going.
Right.
The wrong way that you're doing it because you're feeling good.
Yes,
And they don't care as long as you take that money, right?
that's true.
But they're not anointed by the Father. They're just paid people.
That's true.
We're reading that in chapter 10 and 2.
That's good. Joy.
So can I go back to the fragrance? I want
Yes.
to read this verse. This is in 2 Corinthians 2:14. It says, "But thanks be to Yehovah, who in the Messiah constantly leads us in a triumphal procession, and through us spreads everywhere the fragrance of what it means to know him. For to Yehovah we are the aroma of Messiah, both among those being saved and among those being lost."
That's right.
So there you go. If you're not in your word and you don't have that aroma on you, it's hard to make people understand. I don't know.
You're
I
right.
think that's a great verse.
It is.
I love that.
It is. I want us to recognize, if somebody just came in, so we check that. It might be Jack and Sissy, I don't know. Anyway, Judah is among the tribes. And he's leading in the feast, he's leading in things. And we see over and over again, behold, on the mountains, on the feet of him who brings good news, who announces peace. Celebrate your feast, O Judah. Pay your vows, for never again will the wicked pass through you. He is completely cut off. Nahum 1:15. Joseph is this testimony of good news, that the word, the gospel, the celebration of the feast are led by Judah. You need both. You put together both of them, and the wicked one is cut off. The wicked one is cut off. On your own, read Ezekiel 37 on your own. We're not going to do it now because of time. Ezekiel 37, it's about the dry bones. I don't have that skit up anymore. We had an amazing skit of the dry bones. I'll try to repost it this week. Have you ever watched it?
No.
We did. Our drama team used to be really big, young and old. And we had an amazing skit of Ezekiel and the dry bones rising up. I'll try to put it back online because when our channel left, it left too. And you watch it. And we need to do it again. We need a current version, which is going to take all of us. So anyway, so the two sticks becoming one, Judah draws near. Both houses return to the mountains of Israel with their companions. And this is why the dragon makes war. Okay? I'm going to skip a couple things because I want to get to this last, and we're Oh, there's so much more I missed. Goshen, Lord of Egypt. We are going to the wagons. I wanted to talk about the wagons.
Yeah, that was very, very cool.
Okay.
Because I forgot it. It's in our notes, so.
It is. Some of it's in your notes. Yes. I had 3 or 4 pages on the wagons. Okay. I want to get to, nope, not that. Okay. I want you to understand that Egypt is a womb. What do I mean by that? A womb. A womb. For all you kids, Egypt is a place like in your mama's tummy where there's a baby. So what does that mean?
Where Christ started it all.
Okay.
Well, I think it can be a safety. It's
A,
safe.
a place of safety so a child can grow. Can a child live without, can a baby live if it's not in the womb?
No.
For it's 9 months? Well, I mean, it can possibly live, but you know what I'm saying. It's difficult. So Jacob, the seed of Abraham, goes down to Mitzrayim, its womb. And what happens as it's in that womb of Egypt? It grows.
Yep.
It multiplies. Well, we have been in Egypt out here. What have we done as a people?
Grown.
We've grown and we multiply. See, that womb serves the purpose to develop that baby until the time for it to be born. When a womb has served its purpose, the baby is born. The baby comes through. And it seems that Yah is fulfilling Genesis 3:15 when he allows Israel to be born in the womb of Egypt and contend with his half-brother, birth from Pharaoh, which is on the vein of Cain, okay? Ishmael, Esau. We see that fight, the struggle always. Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Moshe, Pharaoh, Cain, Abel. We see this thing over and over. Hosea 11:1 declares what? When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Where are you existing right now? You are in Egypt, period. Yes, Raina.
I think this is weird how they're doing things now to where they can take your baby out any day you want it. You know,
Yeah.
I was talking to one of my friends yesterday and she goes, her daughter's baby is not good for like a month and a half. And she said, oh, we're at the clinic. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, yeah, because they're going to take the baby out next week. And I was like, she goes, now they have this to where they can do it whenever they want, And I was like, well,
Did she have complications?
Bring
Or?
your baby when you're supposed to come out. But next week they're gonna do a C-section on her and they're just gonna take her baby out.
Wow.
And that's not the first one I've heard. I've other people that have done the same thing, but I just think that's just weird.
It's trying to remove the creator for the creation. When we're looking, and that's astonishing now, knowing also that they have a womb that they create babies in an artificial. We're not going there today.
Yeah, they had a
Yeah, we're
movie
not.
about it.
We're not going there today. I got you, Chris. Let me say this one thing, and then then I'll say more. You talk, and then I'll say a few more. All right. I want us to look. Mitzrayim is a womb. What's Yeshua's mother's name? Mary. Guess what? In Yeshua's mother name, you have that mem. Okay, and so you have bitter waters, and it's spelled with the same as the root of Mitzrayim, except for the Zadi, which indicates the righteous one born in the womb of bitter waters. So Mary was the womb. Mitzrayim is a womb. Not comparing Mary to Egypt. But guys, we're put here for a reason. Remember what we did when we started? We talked about how some of those who have gone before have been disguised as Egyptians, as the world, until their time was fulfilled there, so that they could be birthed and their name and their what they were supposed to do and God's glory be known. Okay, Chris, jump in there, and then I got some more. Sorry.
I think like when you talk about the womb, like the growth, for us to see these types of things happening, it's our choice and how far we're going to go is driven by what we choose to eat, or the ways of the world. So it's important that since we have these rules that are now going to be going forward into this world, we got to make sure to get the right nutrients in this word so that they don't turn away.
Mhm.
That is our job.
Amen.
Even though we make mistakes and some of them say, well, you did this, you did. No, but we're trying to show you what we did
Right.
so that you can grow and mature for what's coming.
Amen. And that's good. That's good. I want to talk about one last thing. I'd love to talk for another hour, but I wanted to bring this up because it so mirrors what's going on today as the Egyptians sell themselves to Pharaoh. And I'm going to go through this one by one, and I want you to think of where we are today and how it's happening before our eyes one more time.
Yep.
In Genesis 47, this program, this thing that Joseph was doing, it's really prophetic, because when there was no bread, chapter 47, verse 13, in all the world, people bought grain from Pharaoh. And as a result, what happened to the gold and the silver and all those things of value? They went to the king's palace. Did I have that on there? Okay. Well, it's still good. We're saying it out loud. And the next year, they had no money. So they had no more gold. They had no more jewels. They had no more silver. They had no more of those financial things that they could sell for grain. So what did they do? They sold their livestock. They sold their herds. They sold their flocks for food. And the next year, they still needed, the famine was still continuing. How long does it go? Kids, how long does the famine last? 7 years. That's right, kids. 7 years. So here's another year. They don't have flocks. They don't have herds. They don't have money. So what do they sell?
Land.
Their land. Okay, before we go to the next thing. Well, no, we're going to go and then we're going to go back. Okay. So that year, Joseph ordered the population to come in and settle in the city in Egypt. Guess what they want to happen in our society today? They want to remove rural communities so that everyone will gather in the cities.
Yep.
They want to remove jobs so that you will become dependent on a pharaoh for your income. In fact, it is rumored that you will get complete debt freedom if you give up all your possessions and all that you have. Down the road, folks, they're going to come to you, and they already are saying, if you give up all that you own, we will wipe away your debt, and then we will provide you with what you need. Oh,
They're
wow.
already trying to take our jobs with robotic stuff, and
Yeah.
it's going to get worse.
But I don't want to get away from that. I want to get away to this point because this is exactly what's happening right now. And people will run for the idea of debt freedom. They will run to the idea, hey, the government's going to give me what I want, and I don't have to do anything for it. They're going to give me all I need. Well, folks, let me tell you, they're not going to give you what you need. But anyway, so here we have this massive resettlement. Joseph did it. Joseph did. He commanded the people to come in and move into Egypt. So one source teaches that Joseph did this so that they would understand that their new homes were a gift. Rashbam says, no, it was sort of evil. Okay. And he relates it to Sennacherib of Assyria. And I've got some stuff in there. I think I do. So in the final year of famine, the Egyptians didn't have land. They didn't have herds. They didn't have money. So what else is there to sell? Themselves in exchange for food. So by the end of the famine, Joseph preserved the lives of the Egyptians, preserved the lives of the world, but at what price? Everything. Every commoner, everyone among them was penniless, a penniless slave, living on the land granted by Pharaoh. When you sell everything, and that includes your land, your home, whatever, guess who owns it, even if you're still living in it? You don't own it. Not that we necessarily do now with taxes, but you don't. Oh, did you have something? Oh, Carlos. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, it's just so good to have everybody here. Okay. So There's a generation that sold everything and they own nothing. And they were just slaves. When I remember, I've talked about this, when people came to the United States and they came to this land, one of the things they wanted more than anything was land, to have land. And what have we been doing? We've been selling our farms. We've been selling everything we have so we can move into the city. Oh my goodness. Why do we do that?
And the elite are buying up a lot of land too.
The economic policy in the ancient world is as ours. It has both short-term and long-term consequences. We've got to remember that there is a counterfeit Joseph out there requiring the very things that we just said. And the pressure is going to be there, and we're going to be standing apart. We may be standing apart in literally in tents together, but we will stand apart and say no. Carlos.
I don't know, this goes to what, you know, what they have in the agenda of the line, the cities that they're building out there.
Yeah.
The line, and pretty much only the rich people are going to be in there. Yeah. You know?
It's true. Guys, that's going back to the beast is going after the bride.
What's that?
And he's wanting to destroy you. And he wants to take you and everything you have so that you have nothing, so that you are so fearful that if I don't bow, if I don't do what they say, I'll have nothing. Daryl.
One thing that I've learned recently, that the first city was founded by Cain. Before that, every man had his own farm and was living on the land.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about this. Like I said, we're going to continue this discussion and we're going to go deeper. And I think it's going to be encouraging. It might also step on our toes a little bit, but it's going to be really good. And we're going to continue with this at 3:00. I worked really hard on this message and I really believe it's a word from Yah. And because we're not done here. We're not even done with the notes I planned on doing today. Much less, we had to skip through some things, including the wagons. So I'm so sorry. Anyway, we are real quick. I'm going to take I wanted to take 15, but is there any questions that you have or comments that you want to say real quick? Anybody in the room over this Torah portion or?
Going back to relationships, it's not just you that can sever a relationship with someone personally. You can also cause a relationship to be severed between two people.
It's true. That is absolutely true. Anything else? Any questions on the Torah portion or brief comment on something?
You gotta be with your tribe, okay?
You need to be with your
You gotta
tribe.
be with your tribe because things are coming.
And-
If you're not, you're gonna be out there like a lone wolf.
And here's the thing, we need to gather, but I believe, and this congregation will say this, you need to find a congregation that's full of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit,
And the word.
the
Both.
Torah, and Yeshua. It has to have all three.
God, and you have to have the word, which is Him.
Amen.
The Spirit is the guide.
All right. So you guys, there's a private chat. Hold on just a second. Let me see. Okay. Pastor John's going to close this out for me. So I want us to pray real quick. And like I said, if you can stay, do it. Hey, family, it is so wonderful to see all my kids, all my little kids. I love you. I love you so much, Adasa. Look at all of you. They're beautiful. Oh, I love you, Chris. I love you, Lemuel. I love you all. Michelle. Oh, Michelle's all grown up. And I'm sorry that we didn't have class. We will have class. So don't worry about that. And my family and my brothers and sisters, to see like Carlos here today, you've been out and I'm so, you and Raina walking into this door. I get that way with Raina, but when Carlos is at it, my heart is just going, woo! For both of you to be here and for the rest of this family to be here. And especially, since Pastor John is out, that really encouraged me because he's dealing with the loss of his father. So thank you. I love each of you. And we are not the same without each of you here. So know that. Pastor John sends his love, Michael.
I think it's wonderful to see this stuff.
We got a full house and it's beautiful. So we got worship coming up and we got a great word and I am going to preach it. So I am preaching it because I think we need to hear it.
I think it's been a month or a month and a half since we had this many people.
Anyway, so you guys, thank you online. We will see you on the next round. And hold on, John's telling me set the camera and oh, okay. Thank you, John. He's gonna start everything for me for service. Good. Thank you, Mr. Craig. Pastor Craig. Whatever. All right. Does anybody want to say hi to John real quick? Hi, Pastor John. We love you. All right. Okay, give our love. We will see you next time. John, I'm going to let you close out and I will talk to you later. Blessings to you all. Shalom.